It all. Can you unmute?
I lost my view.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are now admitting all the participants. Good afternoon, everyone. We are now admitting all the participants. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Miguel from the ASEAN Secretariat. Welcome to the first web forum. Before we start, we would like to inform everyone. The ASEAN Secretariat. Welcome to the first web forum. Before we start, streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, and the ASEAN website. So before we begin, we would like to share some information for all the speakers, the moderators, and also for participants who would want to give verbal interventions. We would like to request if you can speak in a reasonable pace, not too fast and not too slow, because we have live captioning in this web forum. If you can take a look at the bottom part of the screen, there is an option there for closed caption. If you want to see the subtitles, you can click on the CC button and select Show Subtitle, and then the live captioning will appear. If anyone would like to change the font size, you can select the settings and enlarge or minimize the font size. Second, we are going to entertain questions and comments from the chat box in the Zoom meeting. So if you have any comments or questions, our team will monitor the chat box and we will take note and raise those questions. For participants who are joining us from YouTube, Facebook, and the ASEAN website, you can share your questions and comments, and our colleagues will monitor and share with all of us. Lastly, if there are any verbal interventions or questions, please introduce yourself by giving your name and organization.
Dah ada 2 booking tu.
Ini saya pun. Everyone nak kelompok.
So dia kata to introduce yourself and your
Sebenarnya.
organization, macam mana dia nak?
Okay, with all of those information, I think it's time for us to start our web forum. We would like to invite our Deputy Secretary General, His Excellency Kumpok, for the Association Community to give welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, Miguel. A representative of the senior official meetings on social welfare and development, representative of ASEAN sectoral body from the ASEAN social cultural communities, ASEAN economic community, ASEAN political security communities, and cross-sectoral ASEAN bodies and affiliated entities. Representative of ASEAN dialogue partners, ASEAN development partners, and ASEAN other partners, representative of organizations of persons with disability, the private sectors and think tanks, Excellency, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. It is my great honor to welcome you all to the ASEAN Web Forum on Disability Inclusion and COVID-19, engaging persons with disability for effective response and recovery. This event marks another milestone in ASEAN as we continue our journey to promote and protect the rights and welfare of persons with disability in the region. Today's event is the first in a series of 3 webinars on the theme Disability Inclusion and the COVID-19 pandemic, ensuring accessibility, equal rights and opportunities for all. The webinar series hopes to provide an avenue to exchange knowledge as well as to discuss and learn about common challenges and good practices on disability inclusive responses to the COVID-19 pandemic and identify pathway toward equitable and inclusive recovery. The webinar series also contributes to the ongoing implementation of the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025, mainstreaming the rights of persons with disability adopted in 2018. At the outset, I would like to express my sincerest gratitude to the ASEAN Disability Forum and the General Action Network for Disability Access for jointly organizing with the ASEAN Secretariat the Web Forum today. Now more than ever, we continue to forge our partnership to battle the impact of the pandemic as it disproportionately affects people in ASEAN, including persons with disabilities. The COVID-19 pandemic has undoubtedly resulted in devastating consequences in society and the economy, particularly on vulnerable groups, including persons with disabilities. The pandemic continued spread has exacerbated the vulnerabilities of persons with disability, comprising 15% of the world population. Persons with disability and their lives are upended by this pandemic. Broadly, they encounter challenges in terms of accessing information, while some experience social isolation and enhanced exposure to violence and abuse. This also entails suffering from socio-economic consequences of COVID-19 and its containment measures. Engaging persons with disability in responding to and recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic harnesses the potentials as active agents of change. Meaningfully, involving them in decision-making process gives life to the global commitment enshrined in the conventions of the rights of persons with disabilities, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Agenda for Humanity, as well as the United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategies. Moreover, it leads to realizations of our collective pledge to leave no one behind. At the regional level, ASEAN has consistently prioritized addressing the compounding risks and vulnerability faced by persons with disability during the COVID-19 pandemic. Following the adoption of the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan, mainstreaming the rights of persons with disability, which highlights the shared commitment and efforts in building an inclusive ASEAN community by 2025, the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Social Welfare and Development issued a joint statement on mitigating the impacts of COVID-19 on vulnerable groups in ASEAN that emphasize the efforts to facilitate accessibility to essential goods and services and safeguarding the well-being and livelihood of persons with disability, among others, in times of crisis. To fulfill our aspiration and commitment, an integrated approach is necessary. This approach takes into consideration multi-dimensions encompassing human rights, health, education, social protections, and living standards of persons with disabilities. I highly welcome the continuing efforts toward effective cross-sectoral engagement as demonstrated by this platform. It is my hope that we use today's forum to exchange ideas on how to propel our region to greater heights by making sure that persons with disability are substantively and meaningfully engaged in designing and developing policies and programs to address the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. We will be able to realize the vision of a people-centered, people-oriented, inclusive ASEAN community. With this word, I wish you a successful forums and fruitful deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DSG Kongpok. At this point, we would like to invite Ms. Gillian Ray, Development Counselor from the Australian Mission to ASEAN, to share some remarks.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Australian Government, it is my pleasure to join the first ASEAN Web Forum on Disability Inclusion and COVID-19. I hope that everyone continues to be safe and well during these challenging times. Firstly, I would like to thank Deputy Secretary General Kongpok for the invitation to join today's webinar and the very good opening remarks you've just made. I'd like to express my thanks to the ASEAN Secretariat and Australia's disability partners, Agenda and ADF, for their assistance in arranging this event. The impact of COVID-19 has led to unprecedented challenges. All states, including Australia, have had to act quickly to protect lives and livelihoods. In May this year, Australia's Foreign Minister launched a new development strategy called Partnerships for Recovery, Australia's COVID-19 development response. This strategy has three key objectives: health security, stability, and economic recovery, and places a strong focus on Southeast Asia. Our approach emphasises ASEAN centrality, but most relevant to today's discussion, it has a focus on women and girls and persons with a disability. We greatly value our strategic partnership with ASEAN and our program partners. In June, the special ASEAN-Australia Foreign Ministers meeting on COVID-19 affirmed our shared commitment to tackle the pandemic's impacts. Our Foreign Minister announced a $23 million package to bolster ASEAN's health security, stability, and economic recovery. Through this support, Australia is committed to assisting our ASEAN neighbours to manage the impacts of the pandemic, including working with ASEAN to promote and protect the rights of persons with disabilities and other vulnerable groups. This effort continues through our global, regional, and bilateral engagements. We have worked closely with program partners to pivot our development assistance in response to COVID-19. For the Australian mission to ASEAN, this includes our counter-human trafficking, labour migration, economic growth, and health programs. Our Disability Rights in ASEAN project continues to advocate for the use of the Enabling Master Plan in COVID-19 response and recovery, and we continue to explore opportunities to support ASEAN bodies and disability partners in this work. Australia is very proud to support ASEAN's development and implementation of the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025, mainstreaming the rights of persons with disabilities. We are pleased to see and continue to encourage the active involvement of persons with disabilities in its implementations, ensuring that no one is left behind in COVID-19. The efforts of ASEAN and its member states to uphold the rights of people with disabilities is commendable. These obligations are outlined in the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan, are reinforced by action points to help guide implementation, and can be used to maximise the effectiveness of COVID-19 responses and recovery. It is so encouraging that the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Social Welfare and Development convened a special meeting on mitigating the impacts of COVID-19 on vulnerable groups in ASEAN. This included the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan as a key framework to use in response to the COVID-19, and support social protection, inclusion, and resilience of poor and vulnerable groups in ASEAN. I welcome the opportunity that the webinar series provides to explore the impact of COVID-19 on persons with disabilities, many of whom are already facing multiple levels of exclusion and added disruptions to daily life, health, and social services. I look forward to hearing the discussions this afternoon and wish everyone well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gillian Reeve from the Australian Mission to ASEAN. Your remarks are quite encouraging. So now we move to the objectives of the webinar, and I would like to invite Dr. Sita Sumrit, the Assistant Director and Head of Division of the Poverty Eradication and Gender Division of the ASEAN Secretariat, to share the objectives of this first web forum.
Please, I cannot hear your voice.
That's okay now.
Hello, we cannot hear your voice.
Hello.
Hello.
Dr. Sita, we could
We
not
cannot
hear
hear
you.
you.
No voice, no sound.
No
There's
voice, no.
no voice. No voice.
Hello, this is Miguel. Can you hear us now?
Miguel, we can hear you. Can you hear us from this side?
Yes, now we can hear you, Dr. Sita. Hello.
Yes, now okay.
Sorry. my team is to threatening to harm me now because okay, so on the objective of the forum, let me repeat very quickly because it's my fault. I forgot to turn on the microphone. So for the objective of this forum, we would like to raise the awareness, especially on the disability inclusive analysis and approach, not only to responding to, but also to recovering from the pandemic. So eventually, we hope to be able to identify solutions and pathways to mainstream the rights and promote the welfare of persons with disabilities as part of the implementation of the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan. DSG has mentioned this twice, so this is our blueprint to move forward with promoting the rights of persons with disabilities in ASEAN. Again, a very quick information that this is only the first web forum that we have now. There will be two more. The second one, the second webinar will focus specifically on the ASEAN economic integration, on how the economic sectors can embrace the principle of disability inclusion. And for the third one, we will focus on smart cities and ASEAN connectivity. So this is the, by nature, is the cross-sectoral body of ASEAN. So if you look at the interrelation between the first one, the second one, and the third one, we will see that this is the attempt to address disability as an issue concerning all pillars of ASEAN and all the sectors, and not just the socio-cultural community. So this is a very brief presentation of the objectives, and I'm very sorry for the technical issue caused by me earlier. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sita. Maybe we can ask the participants if you have any comments or if you have any issues with the sound or with the audio and the video. You can type in the chat box, or you can type in the chat box your comments or your questions. We have our team monitoring the chat box, and also you can open your screen and signal to us so that we can invite you to share your comments. Since we're still in the opening session, just to wrap up the opening session, we would like to inform everyone that we were very happy to announce that there are around 100 participants who are joining in this Zoom meeting. And also we have other participants who are joining us from YouTube, Facebook, and the ASEAN website. So the participants are ASEAN sectoral bodies from the ASEAN socio-cultural community, the ASEAN economic community, and sectoral bodies from the ASEAN political security community. We also are being joined by sectoral bodies who are cross-pillar bodies in ASEAN, and also affiliated entities, networks, and civil society organizations. We're very happy to also welcome ASEAN Dialogue partners and development partners, and the representatives from the private sector and international organizations, particularly our friends from the UN agencies. So by my watch, it's 5 minutes before 2 o'clock. Maybe we can proceed to session 1. I will be moderating session 1, and we have allotted 30 minutes for this session. This session will focus on recognizing new vulnerabilities and impacts of COVID-19 on persons with disabilities in the ASEAN region. We invited two speakers to share their thoughts on this issue. And the first speaker will share his thoughts on the question, what are the new vulnerabilities faced by persons with disabilities brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic? So at this point, I would like to invite Mr. Wong Lun Yong from the NCBM Malaysia to give a presentation. Pa, you have around 8 to 10 minutes for your presentation. Over to you, Pa.
Okay, thank you very much. Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN, representative of the Australian Mission to ASEAN, representative from the ASEAN Secretariat, ASEAN Disability Forum and Agenda, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, and all who are watching this live event, either Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube. So my name is Wong, and I'm from the National Council for the Blind Malaysia. So I've been given the task to discuss about recognizing new vulnerabilities and impacts of COVID-19 on persons with disabilities in the ASEAN region. So, okay, change the next slide, please. So, as we all know, COVID-19 pandemic is unprecedented and caught everyone unprepared. Nevertheless, all countries, including ASEAN countries, have to take drastic measures to stop the spread of this deadly disease, including total lockdown, which have a huge impact on all already vulnerable community, such as persons with disabilities. So at the onset of this, we all face many problems because we are a vulnerable community. So some of the vulnerabilities that I have listed down here include, number one, there's no prepared policies or standard operating procedures specifically to cater to needs of PWDs during this time. Of course, this is understandable because nobody knows that this pandemic is coming, so it caught us all unaware. Second is lack of accessible information on the COVID-19, including preventive measures and where to get help. So we can see at the beginning, a lot of announcements and infographics on TV are not accessible. We don't have sign language interpretation, and also we don't have audio. That is at the beginning. The third one is facilities and services to handle COVID-19 not accessible to PWDs. We know that many of persons with disabilities also, if they need to do a swab test, they don't even know how to do it, and frontliners might not have the proper training to explain to them how to do it. Next slide. This is very crucial. Assistance to get daily necessities, including medical medicines, because when lockdown, not all persons with disabilities are living with their families and friends. Some of them living by themselves, so they find it difficult to get daily necessities, including some of them do not have facilities to cook themselves. So you give them provisions, or you give them rice, sugar, but they can't cook themselves. So they actually need cooked food. Next, feeling of stress, anxiety, and uncertainty under lockdown. I'm sure this is not only a problem with persons with disabilities. Everybody faces this problem, especially children, more so children with disabilities. Next is loss of income. Yes, this is a great problem. Next is unable to access online services. A lot of people say that you should buy online, shopping online, but if you don't have internet connectivity and you don't have the skills and you don't have the equipment, it is not possible to do that. Social and physical distancing might discourage general public to offer assistance. So there's a lot of people talking about physical distancing, 1 meter and all that. But when dealing with persons with disabilities, we cannot have this kind of social distancing, so it's difficult to give them assistance. Unsure whether data collected through contact tracing apps will be well protected. This is not only for persons with disabilities, I think everybody is worried about that. And the last one is difficult to differentiate between fake news and real news. So we are always in fear because we don't know which is fake and which is real. So we have a lot of lessons learned that we can move forward. So next slide. All stakeholders, including government, CSO, and ODP, should work together in formulating policies and standard operating procedures to care for PWDs. This happens, especially in Malaysia. One great example I can give you is we all work together with the government to come up with a standard operating procedure to restart massage business for the blind, so which has been approved by the government. So this is one very good example of how all stakeholders can work together. Next is ODP should be the prime mover in advocating for well-being of disabilities. So in Malaysia and many other ASEAN countries, I was informed, and through our discussion, a lot of ODPs played major role in trying to get their government to respond quickly to needs of persons with disabilities. Information made accessible. This has happened from the very beginning. We don't have sign language interpretation for important announcements, but after a while, it has come on board. And also a lot of infographics about how to care for yourself, how to wash your hands, and how to wear face mask is already on with infographics with audio. So even people who are blind can understand. Balancing between life and livelihood. This is important because though we know this is a deadly pandemic, but life still have to go on, and we still have to work, and we still have to get income. So in many ASEAN countries, government has balanced that life and livelihood so that we all can continue with our lives. Inclusive policies for all, yes, all the government aids and all the support they're given by the government should include persons with disabilities so that they too can be covered. We don't have to every time come up with a special scheme for persons with disabilities if we have a inclusive policy for all. So social protection programs should also include persons with disabilities. That's true. So in Malaysia, for example, we do have a lot of special assistance given by the government, either in cash or also in kind, to assist persons with disabilities. Next is a recovery program should take PWDs into consideration. So recovery program, we need to not only recover, but we should recover better. So we should include persons with disabilities in whatever plan that we are going to have to recover. Next is support system with dedicated staff and volunteers to assist persons with disabilities. We need to establish a good support system because we don't know when the next pandemic will come or when the next disaster will come. So we should all work together to work out a very good support system. And lastly, we are happy to note that in many countries, especially in Singapore and also in Malaysia, some by-election, they conducted election at the new normal, and they have also given special consideration to persons with disabilities. Okay, next slide. We talk a lot about the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan. So this master plan can support, this master plan has a lot of action points which can manage the impact of COVID-19. So it is a comprehensive document which outlines clearly what the ASEAN three pillars, economic, political, security, economic, and also social, cultural, can assist in COVID-19. I summarize some of the action points because it's not easy to read the whole document. So next slide. In brief, we can, like for example, rights-based. We should now, whatever we do should be rights-based approach towards person with disabilities. So the action points are here. For example, APSC 4 talk about training, APSC 5 talk about awareness. The next is consultation with all relevant stakeholders, including ODPs and person with disabilities. The next one is inclusive development and policies for all. So this is very important because whatever we do, we should include all, including persons with disabilities. Sufficient budget allocation. So we cannot run away from money. So whatever we do, we need to have budgets. So there should be sufficient budget allocation, also include persons with disabilities. This next point is very important, sharing lessons learned and best practices among all ASEAN countries. So I'm sure we have gone through a lot of experience, we have gone through a lot of challenges, and also we have come up with innovative solutions. So in ASEAN is a good forum that we can all share. Next is we talk about data collection. So there need to be proper statistics. I'm not sure whether we know how many persons with disabilities actually got COVID-19. As far as I'm concerned, in Malaysia, there's none. I'm not sure about other ASEAN countries. So this kind of information we should be able to capture. And then regional cooperation, all ASEAN countries should work together in order to be able to recover, and not only recover, but recover better. And last one is ensuring that no one is being left behind. So even persons with disabilities and other marginalized groups shouldn't be left behind in whatever recovery efforts that we are taken. So my last slide, in conclusion, we are certainly not out of the woods yet. The pandemic is not over. In fact, we can see second phase emerging in some countries, and I hope it will not be a big problem in ASEAN. We need to continue to be vigilant. The real challenge will come when finally the vaccine is available. How to ensure equal and equitable access for all when we have the vaccine? Are PWDs going to be given the vaccination last? You know, you give to everybody first because we think persons with disabilities are not important, so they can be given vaccine last. Let's all lay the groundwork for full inclusion, as we do not know when the next disaster will strike. May God Almighty protect all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Wong, for that very concise presentation. So we see that the measures undertaken to prevent the spread and respond to the pandemic has led to new vulnerabilities. We saw from the presentation that physical distancing has led to discouraging the provision of assistance. There's also some issues on the reliability of data on contact tracing. And there's also an issue on fake news. But also we see that there's an opportunity for organizations of persons with disabilities to take the lead and be engaged and meaningfully involved in designing, implementing programs, not only in responding to but recovering from the pandemic, as well as ensuring outreach and, more importantly, preparedness, no? Because as was pointed out, this is really an unprecedented pandemic. So it would be prudent to engage as early as possible persons with disabilities in the preparedness stage. And lastly, we saw that the Enabling Master Plan has already provisions that show us the way, on how to do this. So now we can move to the next speaker who will share her thoughts on the question, What are the impacts on women and girls with disabilities caused by the COVID-19 pandemic? And at this point, I would like to invite Ms. Hong Ha from the Hanoi ILC Vietnam to share her views. Over to you, Ms. Hong Ha.
Okay. Well, hello everybody. I'm Hồng Hà from Hanoi, Vietnam. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I
Yes,
see that
yes.
I can recognize that the voice is unstable. Is okay for everyone? Well, okay.
Yes.
So I'm waiting for the slide. I'm waiting for the slides. Can you show my slides?
Ms. Hong Ha, maybe you can share your screen with us.
Wait for me for a few minutes.
Ms. Hong Ha, I think we have your slide now, so we can share the screen from our side, and you can continue with your presentation. Would that be okay?
Well, all right now. Well, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
That's okay. I'm going to speak about the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on women with disabilities and children with disabilities. I cannot see my slides on the screen. Okay. Sorry for the missing words. Impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on women with disabilities. First, women with disabilities in the time of pandemic can become one of the most vulnerable groups. They lack the medical check or treatment, especially for the diseases related to women and girls with disabilities, due to the fear of getting infected with COVID-19 at the hospital. I see many women with disabilities refused, even they are suffering from a lot of diseases like diabetes and high blood pressure, but they refuse to go to see the doctors at the hospital because they fear to get infected. Men with disabilities have become unemployed or redundant very easily. If a company or even a company or some organization that employs women with disabilities, they tend to keep men with disabilities. And women with disabilities can be redundant very easily. And they can lose their business. So they do not, if the women with disabilities have children, they do not afford education for their children, and they do not afford the necessaries for life of all the family as well. And women with disabilities and children with disabilities need the access to services. For example, independent living service, medical service at home, and sorry, the previous slide, please. I haven't finished the previous slides. Well, okay. They need the service during the time of COVID-19, the pandemic, especially during the distance, the social distancing. But they do not access, they cannot access the services, or even they cannot afford. And they are not well prepared to face the difficulties and rebuild the business. So they are always very embarrassed what to do. Next slide, please. And for the children, I think they have to suffer a lot from the impacts of the pandemic. Sorry. Next. Oh, sorry. And no, the previous one, please. Okay, the children with disabilities have to suffer from many other different afraid of let them get the infection. So they think this is dangerous to bring them to hospital. So they usually tend to have the treatment at home, and it's sometimes very dangerous to the children with disabilities. And many children with disabilities have lost their opportunities to go to school, to access education. For example, the poor families and the one in the rural and mountainous areas cannot afford smartphones or tablets for children to study online, or the service to bring them to school. Some of the areas where the pandemic is not have cause any difficulties, they can go to school. But some of the children cannot go to school because no accessibility to school, and they need someone to bring them to school. But during the pandemic, people are afraid of contacting, so not many people are ready to bring them to school. Okay, next please. And that's a situation of women and children with disabilities. And during the COVID time, and after that, in Vietnam, we can have some lesson learned and best practice. And I think it's the same in different countries in the ASEAN region. We practice, we have a best practice with the addressing issues to the government. During and after the COVID-19, it is a very prompt after the problems happened. And we got the youth and women with disabilities involved to address the impact to the government agencies or to the local governments and so on. Then the OPDs with young leaders were quickly empowered and motivated and involved to make a decision and suggestions for solutions on practical assistance and supports to people with disabilities, and focusing on women with disabilities and children with disabilities. And we have some, I'm not sure about the other countries, but I think they, if they do that, I think they can have the same output like in Vietnam. In Vietnam, we have the mainstreaming from the government at once by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Social Affairs and local governments. They supported the vulnerable groups, and we could have the booklet on COVID-19 pandemic and prevention measures from the Ministry of Health very soon after the pandemic happened. And they included the information about the COVID-19 and about the viruses, and they posted the the instructions to people with disabilities how to prevent it, and to the assistant families or personal assistants how to help people with disabilities during the time of COVID-19, and how to help them to report to the health authorities if anything happened. And okay, so continue, please. One more slide. So after that, we promote the participation of the ministries and government agencies. And we think we should ask for the ASEAN sectoral bodies as well as stakeholders on addressing the impact to all the governments in the ASEAN region. Based on the key action mentioned in the Enabling Master Plan, ASEAN Master Plan 2025, and we suggest to add some urgent support from the action plan for the pandemic situation of each country. For example, we can add to the ASCC 6, concretely the service and financial support during the time of pandemic. For the sorry, with my spelling mistake, ASCC 13 is we should government the support for economy recovery and maintaining access to the education and employment opportunities after pandemic time for people with disabilities, focusing on women with disabilities. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hong Ha from Hanoi ILC, Vietnam. So from her presentation, we can clearly see that the pandemic has impacted disproportionately women and children. Concretely, we saw that jobs and businesses were lost. Also, there's inaccessibility of medical services. From the presentation, we also saw that it's important to engage women with disabilities, youth with disabilities in the designing, implementation, and outreach of programs. No? And also it echoes what the earlier presentation showed, that the implementation of the Enabling Master Plan is quite important, and it has shown us the ways, on how to go about it. But what we can pick up from this presentation is that there's a sense of urgency. It's important that we act immediately, use the Enabling Master Plan so that we can move forward to engage persons with disabilities in responding to and recovering from the pandemic. So right now, we are running a bit over time. We are looking at the chat box, and we don't see any questions. Maybe we can look at the if there are any questions now or inputs. If I can suggest, maybe we can ask the participants to type in the chat box your questions or inputs. We will take note of them, and time willing, we can address them later towards the end of the forum, so that we can give more time for the next presentations. So I hope that is okay. With this, I would like to hand over the moderation of session 2 to Pak Lim, the chair of the ASEAN Disability Forum. Pak Lim, over to you, Pak, for the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome to this second session, and I'm very pleased to, in the interest of time, to quickly introduce our first speaker, a dear friend of mine, Mr. Ebner, who is from the Center for Inclusive Policy as well as the ADF representative in Philippines. Ebner, please.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Are you going to share my PowerPoint or I am going to be the one? Maybe I'm the one, no? So thank you for the opportunity to talk about how people with disabilities were engaging with the government during this COVID-19 pandemic crisis. And as you can see in this slide, organizations of persons with disability are working with government by targeting the persons with disabilities because local organizations have their list of uh, persons with disabilities in their community. So it is very important to work with the local organization to identify persons with disability and to coordinate how to deliver the different assistance available to the people affected by the crisis. You know, organizations of persons with disabilities are a natural mechanism to monitor the situation of persons with disabilities, which is very useful to give feedback to government. Other times, organizations of persons with disabilities takes additional action by sourcing out other resources to support persons with disabilities. And it happened a lot of times to many organizations that I know of, whether in Manila or in rural areas. And it is also very important that the government recognize the important role of persons with disability. And during the crisis, it's very clear that our role has a significant impact to the lives of many persons with disability. Therefore, it is important to support organizing of persons with disabilities and to support the organization so that they can play an active role in our community, in our society. You know, the lack of this data resulted to poor targeting. But then again, when the data is available, it was not being used as for targeting and for delivery of services. In some of the surveys and webinars conducted, local government did not use the disability data available in the local level. So this is very unfortunate. Also that the social assistance provided by the government is only focused on basic living costs and not considering the disability related needs such as the maintenance medicine, the access to transportation, accessibility of the point of service delivery, the personal assistance. Those things were not recognized as very important in the lives of people with disabilities. And you know, this motto of us, nothing about us without us, is very important, no? And the lived experience and the knowledge of persons with disabilities to implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is very crucial because we know what are the barriers to accessing the different programs and services. We know the different barriers we are facing, so we can point out to the government what kind of measures they have to undertake to improve the situation of persons with disabilities. So therefore, participation of persons with disability actually contributes to better outcomes. So it must be recognized by the government to if they don't recognize it, nothing will change. So consultation is a very important instrument to make sure that the views of persons with disabilities are factored in the design of the programs, the policies, and everything. So we need to support organizations of persons with disabilities. And I would like to give an example with the in business practice wherein the company would like to know the views of the people that they need to consider in producing the product. For example, soap. The company will conduct surveys to know what is important for the potential customers. For example, the smell of the soap or the bubbles or how long does it last and other things. If the company listen to the potential customer, people will buy and use the product. This is also true for any services, especially for government services. If we want the people to use the services, we need to consult and listen to the user of the service. Otherwise, they will not be able to use the service. Then the government will fail to achieve the goal of the program, which is, in this case, protecting the people from the negative impacts of the crisis. So I think that social protection plays an important role in improving the lives of persons with disabilities. Deprivations to different disability support services resulted to poorer health outcomes. Hong Ha mentioned about some of these examples and all the other speakers, and it brings it results also to lower level of education, lower employment rates. So in short, it's the lower quality of life of people with disabilities. So the COVID-19 crisis, we know that it exacerbated the situation of persons with disabilities, and it may even result to irreversible negative impact to their living condition. Establishing a strong social protection system means that persons with disabilities will have greater access to healthcare they need, getting the appropriate assistive products, personal assistance, sign language interpretation, and other support services to support the inclusion and participation of people with disabilities. And the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan builds on different regional policies and frameworks which contributes to implementation of CRPD. The master plan specifically indicated inclusion of disability in disaster resilience plan. All the government must use the master plan as guide to inclusion of persons with disabilities to prevent discrimination and exclusion resulting to increase inequalities. For all the reasons we have said already, persons with disabilities must be supported in order for them to have a meaningful participation in all phases of disaster resilience plan. So meaningful participation is key to inclusive policies and programs that transforms lives of people in the community. Mabuhay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emna. Just a reminder to everybody that if you have any comments or any questions to ask, please put it into the chat box and then we will deal with them at the appropriate time. Now I'm very glad to introduce to you our second speaker, Mr. Bagus Santoso, who is the founder of Indefinite in Indonesia, and he will talk to us now. Mr. Bagus.
Thank you, Pak Peter Lim. So maybe if I could share my own presentation, might be a lot more practical to me. So because I have a couple of pages, so I need to jump. I mean, I need to skip some pages. Can you see that? Everyone can see my presentation? Yeah, okay. While waiting for that, so let me just say thank you for organizer to inviting me for this forum. That's really grateful and appreciated. And the topic is the sustainable financing for disability inclusion. And we have 3 topics here. Oh, let me just, it should be moving. Let me just, it can move. Okay, sure. Okay, thank you. So then we have 3 questions about how the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025 could be used as a basis for strengthening sustainable financing and resources. And what are the approaches to sustainable financing and resources for ensuring disability inclusive response and recovery? And what are the several lessons learned and impact that can be identified from the implementation of inclusive financing in Indonesia? So then let's start from question number 1, the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025. Yeah, so I think we all know that, you know, we have changed for some time. And we have changed the approach, I mean, globally, the approach of the person with disabilities from the charity based to the right base. So that we all know about that. And I think we also have seen the timeline that from the Hanoi Declaration Enhancement of Welfare and Development of ASEAN and Women and Children, and then Bali Declaration, and also then ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, and Kuala Lumpur Declaration, and also that in 2016, and then all ASEAN members then ratified the UN CRPD, and 2018 ASEAN ratified the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025. So we have the complete set, and we also have the timeline, which country and when they ratified this CRPD. So, and then again, so basically this ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025, this is really a good document. And I wish this document can be as a basis to mainstreaming the right of persons with disabilities. Yeah. And then because that has a complete set of everything, including the what is it, action plan on the political and security and economic and social cultural. So we all know about that. I don't need to discuss too much. But what is the point? The point is that the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan has been ratified by ASEAN 30 Summit Meeting 2018. That means each ASEAN member can implement the master plan and the human rights action plan in their own economies and countries. Yeah, and because this master plan has been very comprehensive, but then again, the devil is always in the details. Yeah, and then how this can be adopted and implemented in the real practicality in every economy of countries. Yeah, and then this basically give the master plan give a leeway that, you know, spell out that, you know, making the right works in reality. This in ASEAN countries, it will be really good, and then this will this can, you know, as a basis to advocate this movement for that, include the international organization, disabled person organization, government agencies, and private sectors to raise the awareness of the what will be ideal way to make inclusion with persons with disabilities in practical in society. Yeah. And then with the second approach, with on the second question, the approach of sustainable financing and resources for ensuring disability inclusive response and recovery. So we all know that this COVID bring severe impact to all of us, and also not to mention, that this impact can be more severe to the person with disabilities, because with some obstacle, they have additional obstacle to cope with this. Then therefore, we propose a simple approach in this, how to empower person with the disabilities in economic activity. So we have to differentiate two groups, either disability becoming severe and not severe. If it is moderately severe, and then that's still economically productive, so then the approach must be the right-based approach to empower person with disabilities to be part of the economic activity, and especially to the higher paying activities. So to be more value-added activities. But then for these with the severe disability, and then there is no way to be productive, then will be the right, even though it is a charity, but it's more the right, that they have to live well. Yeah, so that is the proposal. And then if you see, let's just give you an example of the case of Indonesia. Actually, for the case of Indonesia, the data using BPS, the Central Bureau Statistics, based on the survey, it is 8.56% of Indonesian population will be moderately or severely disability. So that is around 21 million. But person with severe disability is around 1.87%, which is 4.6 million persons. Yeah. But then this is based on the survey. But then government doesn't have, that's what, as far as I know, cannot identify who are they from this 21 million or 4.6 million person. Yeah. So this is based on the survey, and then this is the first recommendation, that the first step is that identify who are they, where they live, what is their age, whether they go to school, etc. Yeah, because later I'll show you what is has been recognized by the government from the budget. And then so providing sustainable financing, that will include the government budget. For the case of Indonesia called APBN, and the countries, it has different name, but it is a government budget. And also then supposed to give job opportunities and access, full access based on the right to person with disabilities. And also to our view that I have discussed that from our previous discussion, that the key point to our view is that key point to make the welfare of people with disabilities to make it real is that they have to have access to finance. Yeah, without that, there will be, it's only gimmick. Yeah, and then so let's give you quickly what is now allocated by government. For the case of Indonesia, for instance, there is government allocation for transfer payment, what call it PKH, Program Keluarga Harapan, that gave 2.4 million rupiah. It's, I don't know how to 2.4 million. It's around 180 US dollars. So for people with disabilities or people with having very low income. So, but then how many person from people with disabilities that has been covered from this? It's only 118,000 person compared to the number of the low income people that receive this 10 million. So 118,000 from the 10 million beneficiary. That's basically very little. It's only 0.02%. So we make a rough estimate how much money that received by people with disabilities with this scheme. It's dependent on year to year. It's for this year it's around 441 billion. So then maybe if you're not from Indonesia, that might be difficult to get the view. But 400 billion is around half of the budget of municipality. So that means local government, if Indonesia called kabupaten kota, that's not big one. Then we are calculating and then how much money is supposed to be, based on the right base, with the data from Central Planning Board, Central Bureau Statistics, Bureau Statistics of Indonesia. So if it is 4-something million people that's supposed to be, severely with disability, this is supposed to be 12 trillion. So we are lacking 11.6 trillion rupiah that need to be, allocated. So basically, if then we can help to find out who are they, then I think that government can make that commitment, because money is, to my view, because I've been seeing the budget of the government for some time. So this money can be reallocated from other expenses to give the right to person with disabilities. So that will give 1.87% of the Indonesian people who are severely who has a disability which is in this severe condition. Yeah, that's one thing. And another is that the job opportunities and access. Then supposed to be, government have started in many government, like giving quota. That's a really good move. But then again, this must be followed and to be make this real, to be the chance of the giving access, let's say being civil servant or other opportunities will be widely open. And also for the case of Indonesia, we have 2% of the position, the new position will be offered to the people with disabilities. That's a good move. But some of these quota has not been fulfilled for one way or the other reason. Another from the government budget to invest in the financing for disability inclusion, supposed to be, it becoming more universally designed and person disability friendly facility procurement for the public access, because that is, again, like what has been mentioned by previous speakers, that, to give this, giving access to person with disabilities must, again, I must stress out that it must include person with disabilities, so with the organization, because that without that it's becoming, it's like supply side, it is not demand side, and this is what we're saying is necessary. And another that has mentioned that accessing to finance is really important to make the right real for person with disabilities in ASEAN countries. So the financial inclusion need to be accelerated for person with disabilities. So for the case of Indonesia, we have make that initiative for operational technical guideline that I mentioned. Maybe one or two of you also listen what my presentation about that time. So, but then this is opening up opportunities to person with disabilities to have access either for the saving, for the credit, credit for the person with disabilities, and then either for the payment, for the insurance, that kind of thing must be, given full access to them. Yeah, and this will greatly improve the welfare of person with disabilities. Yeah, this is what I believe, and I don't want to discuss that too long, but you can read my presentation that's been shared to you, I guess, by organizer. Yeah, then I can skip that to the fact that, even so we have that kind of the guideline, but in practice, again, the devil is always on detail. So even though the guideline is there, but then, not all the financial institution has implemented the giving better access with people, person with disabilities. Yeah, this is the reality. Last bit in the question number 3 is that what is the approach to sustainable financing and resources to ensuring disability inclusive response and recovery? Yeah, again, so I would say that again, so then we need, I think earlier that has been mentioned that what is mainly needed is database. We need to have a database, valid database that can identify complete data and then accurate data for the person with disabilities. This will help how we can making this sustainable. And then second is that we have to commitment to ratify this ASEAN 2025 Enabling Master Plan. And this in many countries has been implemented. Yeah, also in Indonesia. Depends the country by country, depend on the budgeting situation. But then again, so what we believe is that it is not about we don't have much money. So what is important is that do we have commitment to to do things, because again, so if you talk about budgeting, it's about making budget priority, where the priority goes. Yeah, that is yeah, I think if you are familiar with budget, public finance is about, where the budget commitment go. Yeah. So then the good thing is that, many region in ASEAN, also Indonesia, many region also has implement the this ratification, and then they make the in Indonesia like a local government regulation that make explicit giving better right access to person with disabilities. Just to give you example for the case of Indonesia, like is Kalimantan province, Pekalongan. This is this is municipality in Central Java, or maybe Tanjung Jabung Timur, Banjarnegara, Karanganyar, Boni, Jember, Banyuwangi, and Sleman. This is in Yogyakarta, also Gunung Kidul in Yogyakarta. This region has have explicit local regulation that giving the right access to person with disabilities. This is a good thing. Yeah, and then therefore it needs a bold step. Yeah, so we just not only just making, formality like ratification, but we need to have a kind of bold step how that this master plan can be implemented in reality. Yeah, and also this we need to have a strong collaboration between government, DPO, private sectors, and all stakeholders to work together hand in hand to make it work. And then I think I've mentioned that this I can skip that. And also private sectors, they also need to have increasing ease of access. Yeah, they have to to improve their access, easing access for persons with disabilities to be part of the private sectors, and then creating universally designed and friendly platform for their workers, customers, and clients. And then also increasing minimal quota for well-educated and trained persons with disabilities workers and partners. Yeah. And also for, again, the last bit is that I need to mention that, okay, again, that the main point is that if you want to empower person with disabilities, that, we have to empower the person with disabilities itself. And also that includes the DPO, yeah, disabled person organization. That I think that the biggest investment is that how we can improve the DPO across in ASEAN countries, and therefore they can empower their members, and then the members should have a better skill, yeah, better ability to be part of the higher paying job, high paying value added, and then becoming more successful business person, or becoming more be part of the economically active society members. So basically that what I would want to share with you, and I'm looking forward to have your input, comment, and Q&A. Thank you so much, Pak Lim.
Thank you very much, Babagus. And I noticed that there is one question that's been raised about, in fact, now there are two. So can you just take a look at it, and perhaps we'll come back to, there are two questions, and one is related to social enterprises and the support level that's given by government to these organizations. The other one is about the financial support to families with children with disabilities. So can I just kind of keep that first, and then while you gather your thoughts, and then we will perhaps take it up at the end of the next session. So if it's okay with everybody. Now I'm very pleased to introduce the moderator for the next session, my dear friend and brother, Brother Tohas, and he'll take over from here now. Brother Tohas.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Lim, for the session and moderation. Our honorary speakers, our distinguished all participants, very good afternoon. I will moderate this session. We already listened to several speakers from the previous session, highlighted how the COVID-19 pandemic has been impacted the life of persons with disabilities. Indeed, we have a barrier. We have an additional barrier instead. But on the other hand, we also have the opportunity to look at some possibilities, some changes, some opportunities, especially since we already have the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025, mainstreaming of the right of persons with disabilities in this region. In this session, we would like to understand the regional as well as the global approach on the disability inclusion during and after the pandemic. I think this is a good momentum for us to answer the question how we can cope with any kind of barrier challenges during the COVID-19 and after the COVID-19, especially for the group of persons with disability. For the first speaker in this session, I would like to invite His Excellency Dr. Richard Tan, the Senior Official Meeting on Social Welfare and Development from Singapore, to give his presentation on how this region already respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, especially in terms of bringing the mainstreaming approach to the response and recovery process, as well as to promote the social protection for persons with disabilities. Dr. Richard Tan, time is yours.
Thank you to us. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to share. I do represent the SOMSWAT, Senior Official Meeting for Social Welfare and Development. And I also was the co-chair of the task force that developed the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025. So today, let me share with you the kind of commitment that we see in ASEAN since the beginning of this pandemic. First, let me announce that the pandemic has actually led ASEAN regional solidarity to a great new height, which is a good sign for all of us. And ASEAN leaders, in fact, because has issued a declaration of a special ASEAN summit on COVID-19. This declaration emphasized the critical need for a coherent, multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholders, and the whole of ASEAN community approach in ensuring the ASEAN timely and effective responses to the pandemic. Now, following this important declaration of a united front to fight the pandemic, 5 ministerial bodies across all ASEAN community pillars issued their respective strategic policy direction to strengthen the ASEAN cooperation in addressing this pandemic. Now, these 5 include the labor ministers. They responded from the labor and employment perspective. Ministers for culture and forestries, and they responded from the food security, food safety, and nutrition perspective. And there was a joint statement from the Minister of Health to enhance cooperation across ASEAN. And then a statement from the economic ministers to strengthen economic resilience in response to this outbreak. And then there was also a joint statement from the ministers in charge of rural development and poverty eradication to see how they can build even greater resilience in the region. Now, I'm also glad to add that leaders of the ASEAN Plus 3 group convened a special ASEAN Plus 3 summit on COVID-19, and they issued a joint statement on their collective commitment to join the fight against pandemic. Equally, if not importantly, if not more significantly, is the special meeting convened by the ASEAN ministers in charge of social welfare and development. Now, they are an important group because they are the one in charge of the Enabling Master Plan. They are in charge of looking after the welfare of the vulnerable groups in ASEAN. Now, they came out to address the mitigating impact of COVID-19 on vulnerable groups, issued a statement highlighting their concern over the pandemic and its adverse impact on the poor and the vulnerable people in ASEAN. Now, very importantly, they recognize the differentiated and disproportionate impact of the pandemic on children, older person, women, girls, and persons with disability, as well as other vulnerable groups. Now, specifically on persons with disability, the ministers for social welfare acknowledge the diverse needs of persons with disability for the COVID-19 response and recovery. They encourage mainstreaming disability in all measures to ensure disability inclusion, eliminate barriers, discrimination, and foster consultation and participation with persons living with the various types of disability and impairment. Minister of Welfare also agreed to mitigate impact on COVID-19 by facilitating speedy recovery and strengthening the resilience of the poor and vulnerable groups. They want access to be facilitated to social protection with appropriate allocation of public funds for social spending. So we hope that all countries in ASEAN would do that. They would like to protect the rights and safety and dignity of persons with disability, to secure their health and safety of social workers at the forefront of the pandemic who are helping people in need. They also want to strengthen interagency cooperation at national level and at intersectoral cooperation at the regional level. And they would like to see the development of comprehensive and integrated post-pandemic recovery program through sharing and good practices, development guidelines and evidence-based data of specific vulnerable group. And we're all attempting to do that at senior official level in all the various different sectoral bodies. And of course, they want to develop continuity plans and measure that are disability inclusive, gender responsive, age sensitive, and promote social solidarity children participation in consultation with all these vulnerable groups and other stakeholders. Now, above it all, we are all engaging in smart city development and trying to leverage on technology, right? So the Minister of Welfare recognized the need to address the digital divide across and within ASEAN among all of these vulnerable people. But if if I can now take you into what has inspired me in ASEAN, so if your organization is committed to enabling persons with disability get back to work, lead their lives with dignity in the post-pandemic recovery, there are organizations in the region that I feel are worthy of your partnership and from whom I'm sure many of you will find great inspiration. One, of course, is the ASEAN Disability Forum. Right? Under the leadership of Puetik, they have been working very, very hard in several ASEAN member states to raise awareness, provide training, promote harmonization of disability legislation and what have you. I raise my hat to Puetik and his members, right? And I'm very inspired by their work, and I hope that they will achieve some result, especially under the ambit of the Enabling Master Plan. Now, there are also other DPOs in many countries that you can work with. For example, one that inspired me a lot is the Phnom Penh Center for Independent Living. They have an inclusive community for persons with severe disability project. They work to end dependency, increase self-reliance of persons with severe disability so that they can work and they can lead their lives with dignity. They also have an empowerment and employment promotion for disability with a goal to promote the social participation of persons with disability through building model of their employment in processing and dissemination of agricultural product in and around Phnom Penh. It's very, very noteworthy what they are doing, and they're achieving great result. The other one that I'm inspired by is Nakhon Pathom Center for Independent Living in Thailand. They started a movement that encouraged persons with disability to work for self-determination, self-respect, and equal opportunities. Now, I know of many persons with disability who really like to maintain that dignity, right? To be able to work, to be able to have the kind of respect that they deserve in our society. Now, beyond the people sector, we can also draw inspiration from the private sector. Now, Grab taxi company, for example, and we all know Grab is expanding crazily. They have unlocked the digital potential of Southeast Asia to expand the employment and the entrepreneurship opportunities for persons with disability. Grab has tweaked their technology to enable hearing impaired person to be able to be Grab drivers. They also did that for a person with his right leg that was amputated in an accident. And so now he can drive a Grab taxi and be self-reliant, self-dependent. And then I saw in the newspaper that they managed to enable a person with disability to deliver food on her own wheelchair. And I think that's remarkable because she feels so proud of the fact that she can do normal work even though she is wheelchair bound. Now in Singapore, there is a business network on disability. It's a community of businesses across various industries. They work in collaboration to share expertise, experience, network, resources to help advance the equitable inclusion of persons with disability. This network, I believe, was started by the Deutsche Bank in Singapore, and they won an award from the Singapore government for their effort in promoting the enabling of an inclusive, supportive workplace where talent can flourish. And in fact, they found quite a lot of talent among persons with disability who can contribute and add a lot of values to corporate environment. There's a bank in Singapore, for example, that employs a person with autism, and a whole department of person with autism, and they are proving to those without disability that they can work better than them in ensuring the documents are accurately scanned, accurately checked, and all that. Right? So they all have special talent that we all should look at, right? And in the case of the Deutsche Bank, they really believe that the inclusion of person with disability in our corporate environment will bring out the best in everyone, not just them, but including those without disability. Now, these and many other organizations shared their knowledge and experiences at an ASEAN Enabling Master Plan conference that I organized in Singapore. I find them absolutely inspiring, and I hope that many other organizations will follow their example, right? Enabling person with disabilities is not just a senior official government's responsibility. It is a responsibility of the private sector, entrepreneur, business owner. It's also the responsibility of the whole community that we are all a part. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Dr. Richard Tan. Thank you for sharing us the commitment of the region, the ASEAN, and also the government for the inclusion of person with disability, as well as brought out some example of how a person with disability engage in the economic empowerment of economic life. So we will see here that person with disability is not only belongs to socio-cultural pillar, but more on all pillar of the ASEAN, including ASEAN economic community pillar. Okay, the next speaker will be Dr. Srinivas Tata from UNESCAP. He will bring us to the idea to the development of disability inclusive in the Asia Pacific region, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic time. For Dr. Tata, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tolhat. It's always a great challenge when one follows articulate speakers like mine. It's great to renew my acquaintance with Mr. Tan when he's been so wonderful in the way he's presented all this. So I hope my presentation will not come across like tepid water after fine wine. But that's I follow so many great examples and the great speakers that came before. However, what I would like to start with is a very clear understanding of in the Asia Pacific region to note that firstly, when we look at the impact on persons with disability, like many have noted before, COVID-19 is not only a health crisis, it is a crisis that cuts across all dimensions, the social, the economic, health, and also maybe to a certain extent, all extents of our lives. Even countries which may think that, okay, I managed the health crisis, are not spared the economic crisis. Remember that a number of countries which may not have very large number of cases, yet face huge economic impact of this crisis. And remember, the impact of this crisis will last for years, if not a decade. And so we are in it for the long haul. As far as persons with disabilities are concerned, first thing to note is the crisis, the pandemic has merely laid bare and kind of widened and exacerbated the existing inequalities and the challenges faced by persons with disabilities. As it is, there were a number of areas where persons with disabilities face challenges, but with the crisis, it's that some of these, we have seen new vulnerabilities, but old vulnerabilities have become deeper, have become more serious. The information that we have got from member states through our surveys, one of the key challenges, of course, immediately when you have the COVID-19 crisis was something that's been referred to by all our speakers before. The key challenge was accessible information. I think the fact that there were such a large number of persons with diverse disabilities, and the fact that information about lockdowns, about services, about information about the pandemic in general was not accessible and left out large segments of the population. That was the first challenge that needed to be addressed. Second, as you know, the pandemic struck so swiftly and economy suffered so sharply. The downturns were so sharp that jobs were lost very, very quickly. And the persons at the bottom of the pyramid, the persons who are the most vulnerable jobs, are persons with disability, and especially women with disability. So firstly, persons with disabilities were often, I think, equally worst affected in a way in terms of the economic downturn, in terms of loss of jobs and employment opportunities. There was also the question of, remember that a number of persons with disabilities needed to access services and also rehabilitation services and health services, which they could not access due to the many countries went through severe lockdowns immediately after the pandemic. And you had this serious problem where people could not access services. Education with children with disabilities. We have all glorified this online education going on, but a lot of these online education opportunities do not address the special needs of children with disabilities. And last but not least, lockdown, we have talked about violence against women has increased during the lockdown period, but violence against persons with disabilities, anecdotal evidence indicates, has also increased. And so these were some of the key challenges that faced us and that we highlighted in our policy briefs and in our webinars for countries to take note. And countries did take note. And as Mr. Tan notes, the ASEAN group of countries, the 10 countries, when I look at they have been at the forefront of taking a number of these actions. And include about 30 countries in our region have taken action to provide immediate help for persons with disabilities. A number of countries have tried to, be more to include persons with disability in a more comprehensive manner and address the concerns of persons with disabilities within their response plans. Because in a number of cases, these were handed over to the disaster response agencies. For example, in India and Bangladesh. And we had an ongoing program with them from before about making the disaster response disability inclusive. And then we tried to use these channels in order to ensure by pushing our guidelines and our policy briefs. And there has been some positive response there. The second positive trend that we have noticed, and that has been also referred to, especially in countries where organizations of persons with disabilities have been active, countries have recognized that the best way to reach persons with disabilities is through these organizations. They are the best ones who know where the individual needs are, what are the needs of persons with disabilities, how best to communicate with them, and how to really structure services to reach them. So a number of countries, especially in ASEAN, have really used organizations with persons with disability to reach out. They also, countries have changed. For example, when we had this crisis, one of the biggest issues which came with the lockdowns that personal assistants and others during curfews could not reach persons with disabilities. So we really, in a number of countries, special instructions were issued to allow personal assistants and other people who were there to support persons with disabilities to be given special passes in order to help persons with disabilities. So all in all, there were a number of other initiatives for prevention of violence against women with disabilities, special call lines for people to call in, and trying to make access to goods and services through special arrangements, including access to pensions and disability allowances. And last but not least, countries that had ongoing programs where they were offering social protection to persons with disability were able to then immediately upscale this and ensure that extra assistance went out to persons with disabilities. But in a number of cases where there was no structured program, this extending assistance to persons with disability became more difficult. So looking ahead, I think apart from going on working with countries in terms of making the disaster response and the response to the pandemic more disability inclusive, I'd like to pick up on 3 or 4 areas of our work, which is going to be very vital. Number one, in ESCAP, we believe that the needs of persons with disability has to be taken on with a multi-sectoral lens. For example, social protection for persons with disability. We are coming out with a serious publication, and I saw this very pertinent question about how are you going to influence countries really to have structured programs to support persons with disabilities? How are you going to ensure that come the next pandemic, there's not persons with disabilities are not in the same state? We have a publication coming out in October, and we want to reach out to all member states to show that covering persons with disabilities with comprehensive social protection is well within the reach of member states. It will only cost a fraction of the GDP. And we are actually going through simulation tools to show them how this can be done. We hope this will be a first step in order to start pushing for comprehensive social protection for persons with disabilities all over our region. Secondly, we are trying to push for disability inclusive public procurement. The only way, sometimes I feel that the costs related to mainstreaming disability are exaggerated. The question is, it is our duty right from the beginning to ensure that all items that we procure, especially through public procurement, should be universally designed. We need to change our public procurement in order to make it disability inclusive. Our great friend and champion, Senator Monthian in Thailand, organized recently, last month, a meeting of the Senate, where the Senate talked to all departments in the Thai government, trying to sensitize them about the need to procure goods, at least because public procurement constitutes a very big chunk of procurement, and to ensure that public procurement should be only of universally designed goods that address the needs of persons with disability. That is going to be a very big core part. We also have a project coming out on along with our Disaster Risk Reduction Center and also with APCD, in order to we have a manual developed on how to make disaster risk reduction responses more disability sensitive and inclusive, and trying to add a COVID pandemic response module to that. And we're going to do that in a number of, and we're going to include our partners APCD, who are based in Thailand, in order to reach out to 3 or 4 countries, test this manual to ensure that it is structured. Our response of including persons with disability is structured. And last but not least, we have, I would like to also pick up on a need to say that accessibility in public buildings and in infrastructure should be as per law right from beginning. Retrofitting is a cost that society may not be able to pay, but that is a necessity that accessible public buildings should be there by law, mandated by law, so that any buildings designed from now onwards, infrastructure, transport, needs to be accessible. And we'll be promoting that through a project by the government of Macau, which is going to look at disability inclusive infrastructure and cities. And last but not least, we have immediately a project that we are going to do along with the Rehabilitation International. It is about looking at some of the 4 or 5 good practices in involving in how the issues relating to persons with disability have been addressed in the pandemic. And we want to collect this in a number. We want to use organizations of persons with disability, give them seed money, and try to look at 4 or 5 best practices, or good practices rather, and then see how, give them seed money to develop it further, and then see, report back regionally and share experiences across countries. So the future really lies in ensuring that we build the cost for disability inclusion into all programs right from the beginning, multi-sectorally across ministries, and not seeing it as a cost, but as an investment. And number 2, and really ensuring that that social protection is a reality for all persons with disability. So I really think that this webinar has really inspired me a lot, and I look forward to a very strong collaboration, which is with the ASEAN Secretariat. And they have always reached out, they've shown vision, and I believe that what happens in ASEAN today is going to influence the rest of the region, the Asia-Pacific region tomorrow. So I really value this opportunity, and I'm sorry I took a little bit too long, but this has been a great opportunity for me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tata, for the excellent presentation. I think this is a good opportunities for us just to understand the uniqueness of the approach that this Asia Pacific region used to ensure disability inclusive development, especially in the way we tackle any kind of barriers due to the pandemic COVID-19. We also have several comments in the chat box, including the ideas of having the disaggregate data to understand the challenges, or how much we go in terms of implementing disability inclusive development. And also there is a question being raised regarding the how to support a person with disability, or even social worker who are living in a rural area, specifically how to bring them the useful of the technology, since the use of the technology now become the main solution for several sectors, including education, on tackle with the impact of the COVID-19. But before we respond to the question, I would like to give the time to Miguel, because I'm not sure whether we still have time or not to respond to the question. So let me end by my moderation here and give the time to Miguel to manage the Q&A and the rest of the program. Miguel, time is yours.
Thank you, Tolhas. Once again, this is Miguel from the ASEAN Secretariat. And as pointed out by Tolhas, we have several questions in the chat box. The first is on how to make sure that responses to the pandemic reach persons with disabilities in remote areas. And also, specific to this question is how to use current technologies. No? Second, there's also a question on how ongoing initiatives at the ASEAN level and at the global level, as presented by Mr. Richard Tan and Dr. Tata, can help change the mindset, no? How persons with disabilities can be viewed and appreciated as agents of change, and specifically as entrepreneurs. No, I'm just very mindful of the time. Maybe what we can do is we can take note of all of these questions, and considering that this web forum is just the first of three, we would have more opportunities to integrate the answers to these questions in the next web forum. So I hope that would be okay to everyone. So just to assure everyone, first of all, that all the presentations given during this web forum will be shared with all the participants. And second, the questions, we will take note, and we will try our best to get the answers and share with everyone. We also take note that in the chat box, some of the speakers have already shared their answers to some of the questions. So, Pat Tolhas, I hope that's okay.
Yeah, sure, Miguel. I think we can continue.
Okay, so at this point, so Pa, I will take the moderation again as we go to the next session on the synthesis and recommendations. Yeah. So at this point, I would like to invite Dr. Sita Somrit to share the key discussion points that were presented during the sessions, and highlight some recommendations that maybe we can all consider as we move from this first web forum to the succeeding web forum. So over to you, Dr. Sita.
Okay, I have turned on the microphone. So for the synthesis, it will be a very short presentation trying to capture the discussion from the speakers. So I think we acknowledge the challenges and the compounded vulnerabilities faced by persons with disabilities in the region. I think the overall challenges, of course, this is the time of uncertainty. So dealing with uncertainties, stress, loss of income and livelihoods, as well as the health-related risk and digital access. So those are among the overall challenges faced by persons with disabilities. But As Mr. Richard has highlighted, at the regional level, ASEAN has expressed a number of key commitments from the sector of health, social welfare, economic ministers, poverty and rural development, labor, with and among all those commitments, the focus, of course, one of the focus is on social protection and the attention to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 on vulnerable groups, including persons with disabilities. In terms of solutions, this is a very rough capturing of the solutions, but I think we have heard the details and more information on suggested pathways and solutions from the speakers. I think most importantly, in all of the presentations, we talked about disability inclusive budgeting, as well as sustainable financing, because at the end of the day, apart from the commitment, we would need finance resources to be able to implement any commitments, including the enabling master plan. Especially on the issue of financial inclusion and access. And of course, I think it's also touched upon the issue of control, access and control. So the next is, of course, we will continue to share the best practices and innovative solutions. And as Miguel has informed all of us, that this is just one of the first forum in the series, and through all these web forums, we hope that we can find innovative solutions, especially to build long-term resilience now that we are thinking about recovering from the pandemic, and ASEAN is working on the comprehensive recovery framework in the context of COVID-19. And of course, we need to recognize the intersectionality of gender, I forgot the comma, gender, age, children, youth, and disabilities, as they all suffer and experience the pandemic differently, with, of course, different voices and needs. And we need, again, investment. I think this was also touched upon in the joint statement of the economic ministers, that we need more investment to recovering from the loss of economic livelihoods, while at the same time politically there is an urgent need to promote leadership and engagement of persons with disabilities in decision making, especially when it concerns the recovery programs and measures from the COVID-19 pandemic. And last one, this is not an engineered attempt, but of course everyone emphasized the engagement with and by private sector apart from the people sector. And I think this both the financing, investment, and engagement with private sector have given us a bit of a glimpse to the next web forum, which will focus on the inclusion of disability into the agenda of the ASEAN economic integration. And that is the synthesis from our end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sita, for the presentation of the synthesis, the key points that were discussed during the previous sessions. At this point, we are now reaching the closing session to formally close this first web forum series. But before inviting before inviting Pak Lim to give the closing remarks, we would like to alert everyone that after Pak Lim gives his closing remarks, we will be having a photo session. So after Pak Lim gives his closing remarks, we will invite everyone to open their screens. So right now, we would like to invite Pak Lim, the chair of the ASEAN Disability Forum, to share the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Miguel. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, in the interest of time, I will shorten my closing remarks. Today, we have listened to our distinguished speakers talk about and illustrate how this subject of COVID-19 and being disability inclusive impact all around, not just ASEAN, but Asia Pacific and around the world, and how people with disabilities need to come together to make this, how to make this place more responsive to their needs and more inclusive of their activities of daily living. We are very aware of how the COVID-19 pandemic is intensifying the inequalities experienced by many persons with disabilities, and they suffer a great deal of disadvantages because they have no access to information and very limited access to healthcare, which is required if they would become a victim of the COVID-19 pandemic. We want to do as much as we can to prepare ourselves while we respond to this COVID-19, but also prepare ourselves for a post-COVID-19 world. And I hope that we'll think very carefully on how this new normal can be actualized for and equalized for all persons with disabilities in the region that we come from. Today is the first of 3 webinars, and I hope that you look forward to more announcements on how and when we will organize the other 2 webinars so that you can actively participate in them. It remains for me to thank everybody for your active participation. We are very grateful to ASEAN Secretariat, to Agenda, and to ADF for organizing this webinar. And I want to make special mention of the many helping hands behind the scene who have enabled us to host this webinar via Zoom, as well as simultaneous broadcast through Facebook and YouTube. And I want also to mention a great thanks to our closed captioners from ADF Philippines, who have been working very hard to make this session more disability inclusive for our deaf and hard of hearing friends. We also have very distinguished participants from the ASEAN sectoral bodies, and we are very grateful for our partners, our dialogue partners, our private sector, our international organizations like UNSCAP, and even our donor like DFAB. We are very appreciative of what we are doing, and I know that this will be a very synergistic approach to overcoming the many barriers that COVID-19 is posing to people with disabilities. Thank you once again, everybody, for your active participation, and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat Lim, Chair of the ASEAN Disability Forum. So at this point, we would like to invite all the participants to open your screens so that from our side, our team can take a screenshot of all the pages. No? So I think there are 3 pages, so please open your screens and show us your smiles. Although my boss is wearing a mask. Okay. All right, so I will count off, yeah? Please smile, and 3, 2, 1. Okay, please hold your smile as we go to the next page. Okay, once again, big smile, everyone. 3, 2, 1. Okay, and one last page. Okay, 3, 2, 1. All right, so with that, we officially close this first web forum. And just like what Pat Lim said, please be on the lookout for information for the second web forum, which will focus on ASEAN economic integration and persons with disabilities in time of the COVID-19 pandemic. So from our side, we would like to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you to our team here in ASEC and also our colleagues who joined us. So we hope that you learned a lot from this web forum, and we look forward to meeting you again in the next web forum. So thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so
much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sita.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Pak Wong. Thank you, Hong Han.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, Dr. Tata. Thank
yeah,
you,
who's that?
Thank you very much from Malaysia.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much from APCD.
Oh, okay. Yes, I know.
Yes,
Okay.
APCD. Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Okay, bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your input.
Thank you all. Pak Tohas, thank you. Pak Miguel,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye na. Bye now. Leave. Nah, do sếp.
Đi vị trí